Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk. Today I'd like to change up the pace a little bit, get away from some of the bulky sporty watches I've been reviewing lately, and I want to talk about dress watches. Specifically, I have three pieces here today. One is the Blancpain Villeret Quantime Perpetual 8 Days. The other one is the Mundi, or the World Time from Breguet. Last but not least is the PanoMaticCounter XL Chronograph from Glashutte. Before I get into talking about these watches specifically and why I have these three particular models, I want to talk about dress watches and how they have evolved over time, specifically over the last 15 years that I've been in this industry. And honestly, the one thing that you're going to see evolving in is their size. Going back 10, 15 years, an average dress watch was probably 34 to 35 millimeters wide. Today's dress watches are much, much bigger. In fact, the reason for that is because guys got into the whole concept of bigger and better. Bigger, sportier, bulkier watches took over the watch industry over the last 10 years, like the AP offshores, like the big Hublots or the King Power Hublots at 48 millimeters, 44 millimeters, 46 millimeter watches. And these tiny little dress watches sort of stopped selling as well as the bigger, sportier, bulkier models. So what do? You stop making dress watches altogether? You stop making perpetual calendars that you've been making for 200 years plus? Absolutely not. You just make them bigger. First, I want to talk about the Blancpain Villeret Quantime Perpetual Calendar. It is a large 42 millimeter dress piece. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the details of the difference between the Quantime Perpetual Calendar as well as a full Perpetual Calendar. Only thing you need to know is the Quantime Perpetual doesn't show you what year it is and doesn't show you a leap year. It still gives you the date, still gives you the month, the day of the week, and a Moonphase. And a much lower retail price usually. This piece retails for $39.5. It's got a beautiful exhibition back. It is a self-winding automatic movement, and this one is the 8 jours. I don't know how good my French or Swiss French is, but it is the 8 jours, which means 8 days. So it has an 8-day power reserve to power this wonderful machine. So if you wear this watch often enough, every other day, every 3 days, even every 5 days or 7 days, you'll never have to wind it. Beautiful deploying clasp. Sorry, this one is all sealed up. I don't know if you can see it, but one thing to mention about this watch is that the first time anybody would get this watch, they'd be like, okay, well, let me set it. And you're going to pull out your crown. You'll notice that the crown only pulls out to one position. You're like, well, wait a minute, how am I going to set all those nifty functions? Do I really have to go around all this time in order to change that date that's down there? Absolutely not. So then what do? You look for those holes where the pusher would go. It's normally on the side to change the date, the time, the month, and so on. Guess what? It's not there either. What Blancpain came up with is what's called the under the lug correctors. And I don't know how well you can see this, but if I do a close-up, you notice these little levers right underneath the lugs, as it's called. By depressing these, you actually get to change what you see on the dial. So there's my date changing. If I press the opposite under the crown adjuster, it will change the month and so on and so forth. So this does have a quick set functionality. It's just a little bit hidden, and you really have to know about it in order to set this watch. Retail value on this piece is about $39,500. Expect to pick this watch up anywhere from $25 to $35 off brand new. On a secondary market, this piece will probably hold its value to the tune of about half its original retail price. Again, go back to 10 years, same Blancpain would probably be around 36 millimeters. You cannot sell a 36 millimeter Blancpain today if your life depended on it. Next, I'm going to go to something bigger and something different. I'm going to go to the Breguet or Mundi or World Time watch. This thing is 44 millimeters. Let me show you the difference in size between the two. I mean, the Blancpain is a huge watch, but look at this thing. Look at the size difference. This thing is a behemoth. This thing is a monster of a watch. So what's so special about this watch? Well, a couple of things. Number one, aesthetically, it's the dial. And let me show you a close-up of that. Now this watch comes in theoretically 6 versions, because what it does is it represents 3 different regions when it comes to world time. So this particular one happens to be the Asia and Oceania version. You can see Asia and Australia right down there. It also comes in a version for the Americas, where you'll see North and South America, as well as Europe and the African continent. Aesthetically, still keeping in line with a traditional Breguet. Look at the side of the watch. Look at the front of the watch. The front, the side, the back of the watch. Everything about this watch screams Breguet with exception of the size. At 44 millimeter, this rivals some of the AP offshores. It's a huge watch. The second cool thing I want to show you about is the actual world time complication. Now again, I don't get into nuts and bolts, but this particular one is worth mentioning. Your traditional world time watch, you're usually spinning some sort of a dial to get to the right times that you want. This has what's called a quick change world time. And the coolest part about it is that you get a button. And that particular button, once it's depressed, it's going to change the time zones for you. But notice the hour hands. The hour hands are jumping as I'm changing the time zones. No more spinning it around, none of that stuff. It will automatically go to where it needs to go depending on the time zone that you choose. And on top of that, the date will change as well. So if I'm going somewhere that's more than 12 hours ahead and it's the next day over there, the date will jump as well, which is a nifty little feature. So how much is that nifty complication going to set you back? $78,900 for the rose gold version and $94,200 for the platinum. What does this realistically trade for in the open market today? For a brand new one, again, you'll pick up anywhere from 25 to 35% off. On a secondary market, again, expect to pick this up at less than half price. When this watch first came out, the Asia version specifically was trading pretty high. You couldn't find one because the Asian market was hot at the time, and they were trading for 10 to 15% off. But the times have changed over the last couple of years, and now this watch is readily available and can be picked up at a significant discount. Last but not least, I want to talk about the Glashutte PanoMaticCounter XL chronograph watch. This is also a 44 millimeter watch, but the watch is much thicker than the previous two that I showed you. And a lot of times you can get a watch that's pretty much the same size in terms of diameter is concerned. Because the watch is thicker, it looks bigger, it feels bigger on the wrist. And I'll give you a quick comparison between the two so you see what I'm talking about. You can see that looking up from the watch, even though they're exactly the same size, this watch seems a little bit bigger, and that's because the case is much, much thicker. So what is the coolest thing about this particular watch is this watch is what I would call a borderline piece. When I say borderline piece, I mean it's borderline a sports chronograph or a sporty watch or a dressy watch. I kind of evolved going from Blancpain looking as a true dressy watch to Breguet, which is something a little bit different, a little more colorful, not as conservative, but still yet a dressy watch, where the Glashutte is really sort of a crossbreed. This can be called a sports watch. This can be called a dress watch. What makes it a dress watch? Well, it's on a leather strap. It's something that can definitely go with a shirt. What makes it a sportier watch? Obviously, its size, the thickness of the case, and the fact that it's a chronograph. So let me show you a close-up of this piece and show you that what I feel is the coolest part about this particular watch. First thing I'll start with is one of the things I love most about Glashutte is their offset dials. I don't know if you can see well enough on camera if I kind of turn this way. The second chronograph counter is actually raised by about 2 or 3 millimeter off the regular dial, which gives it a really, really cool three-dimensional look. The second coolest function, besides the fact that this is a flyback chronograph, I'm sure you guys know the difference between a regular chronograph and a flyback. Quickly show you. As the chronograph second is going, you can actually press this thing back. It'll fly back to 12 and continue going. It's sort of a quick way to reset this instead of having to press the stop button, the reset button, and then the start button again. But the coolest feature of this watch is actually the counter that they give you. Now, this isn't overly complex. All it is just a counter. I know this watch looks super complicated with 6 buttons and it looks like it's 2 chronographs, but all it is really a counter, an up and down counters that goes up to 99. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can go all the way up to 99. If I go down from 0, it'll actually go back down to 99. It'll count back down from 99. How useful is this functionality? I don't know. If you're out there timing laps with your chronograph or your kid is out there running, you want to know how many laps he ran or how many more laps the car has to go in Indy 500 if you happen to be watching that, you can simply use that counter to count laps. You can also count how many times your kid has looked at their cell phone during dinner. It's another useful combination. Overall, it's a really cool feature. It makes the watch look great aesthetically. How useful is the feature? How many times are you actually going to use it? I don't know. I just like it. It looks cool, and I love the watch overall. It is an automatic movement, and it's a beautiful movement at that. The rotor has their logo cut out. Give you a close-up of that. Just an amazing looking piece. What's the retail price of this item? Stainless steel, $25,000. Do I think it's a little hefty for a Glashutte? I would have to say no. And the reason for that is because I feel like a nice stainless steel 44 millimeter chronograph with a counter function, with the raised dial, the flyback chronograph, beautiful in-house movement, all those things make it worth 25 grand. If you compare that to, say, an offshore chronograph, that is a fairly simple regular chronograph movement, this will outbeat it every time. What's going to sell better? It's going to be the offshore chronograph. Because guess what? Dress watches are not as good as sellers as sports models. And it has been this way probably for the last 10 years. You ask an average Joe that likes watches, what would he rather take? A big ass AP or a big ass Glashutte? He's going to say AP. However, this particular Glashutte is something I would probably choose over a lot of sports bulky watches out there just because it's so versatile. It can be a dressy watch, it can be a sporty watch. It looks great, it's 44 millimeters, the functionality is great. It is a watch that if you walk into a room with this, people will wonder what is on your wrist. Resale value? Again, expect to pick this watch up anywhere from 25 to 35% off retail brand new. On the resale market, this watch will fetch around the half price mark, sometimes even more. In conclusion, I just want to say that, you know what, dress watches have come a long way in terms of size. If you think about it, it all started there. Guys like Blancpain and Breguet have been around for hundreds of years. Most of them started out making pocket watches, which were huge. Then slowly but surely, these horological wonders made it into being wristwatches, and they kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller in size. And about 15, I guess, I'm going to say about 10 to 15 years ago is when these trends started to change, and a lot of companies, there were strictly dress company watches where they didn't have, Blancpain didn't always have those big bulky 50 fathoms, and even if they came out with those things originally, they were tiny, they were 38 millimeters, and they were considered to be a big bulky watch. But slowly but surely, these companies recognized the need for a bigger watch, the bigger the better. And honestly, the reason being is because sports watches became so popular that a lot of people started buying up sports watches. And after they had their sports watch and they put on a behemoth that's 44 millimeters, it was very difficult to go back to a 36 millimeter dress watch. It just looked way too small on the wrist. And that's the plain truth of it. If I had my choice, I would have a really difficult time. I would play process of elimination. I'll tell you, this would be the last watch that I pick, which is the Blancpain, because I'm just not a big fan of the brand overall. And it would be a toss-up between the Glashutte and the Breguet, and I would probably go with the Breguet first and foremost, just because the name Breguet to me signifies so many cool things and so many cool inventions, specifically the invention of the tourbillon. And second, I would probably go with this Glashutte. Last but not least, I'm going to show you what's on my wrist. Today I'm wearing the Rolex Yacht-Master 2. And since we talked about sizing in these videos, this is the biggest Rolex that Rolex makes, and that's one of the biggest reasons that I happen to love this particular piece. A little gaudy, but nevertheless, love the watch. So guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this episode in regards to larger dress watches. If you're not subscribed to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time for more watch reviews and other videos.